Hey, everybody. Welcome to Here's the Scoop from NBC News. I'm Yasmin Vasugian. Okay, let us roll out the red carpet. Hollywood's biggest night is coming up this Sunday with the 98th Academy Awards, also known as the Oscars. If you are a movie fan, this is your Super Bowl. Of course, everyone is focused on the movies, the actors, and the red carpet looks. But there is a lot more to talk about than just what is in those envelopes. Hollywood is changing. There has been a lot of industry consolidation, and the awards themselves could look very different in just a couple of years, from how you tune in to the rules around AI. So with that, I want to bring in senior Hollywood reporter Rebecca Keegan and our entertainment correspondent Chloe Melas to help introduce us to the nominees. Hi, ladies.
Hi.
Hi.
Before we kind of get into the nitty-gritty and what is expected to be a big night, I want to know what is coming from your guts, what you guys actually want to see win on the Oscar stage Sunday night. Best Picture, Best Director, Best Male Actor, Best Female Actor or Actress, I should say. Chloe, you go first, and then I want Rebecca to go. Who are you wanting to take home some of those?
Sure. Want is
prizes?
different than should.
Yeah.
All right. Let's start with Best Picture.
Okay.
I'm just going to take a big swing here. Hamnet.
Okay.
I loved it.
Okay.
I cried. I love a good cry. So it was so emotional. It was hard to watch. It was some of the best acting I feel like I've ever seen. And I do think that Jessie Buckley should, and I want her to win Best Actress for Hamnet.
It seems like she's going to take it home.
And then when it comes to actor in a leading role, I'm going to say Michael B. Jordan for Sinners, and then Ryan Coogler for Best Director for Sinners. So those are my picks.
Go ahead, Rebecca. Take us through it.
Okay. Well, my best picture, now this is my personal taste.
Yes.
To win would be Sinners. And
Okay.
largely because this is a big popular movie that a lot of people saw that is made with kind of impeccable craft. It's an original story. It's not based on a book or some pre-existing piece of intellectual property. It came out of Ryan Coogler's brain. And it's sort of in every level, it's really well executed. The acting, the cinematography, the design, the music. As for performers, I too would like to see Michael B. Jordan win. His role in Sinners, he plays two characters. He's twins, Smoke and Stack, and you can tell who he's playing when he walks into a scene before
By the way,
the
it's
character's
not like
name is
Full
announced.
House where there's actually twins in life.
No, there's only
Or like Everybody Loves
sadly-
Raymond.
Yeah, exactly.
Sadly, there is only one Michael B. Jordan in the world, and he is playing two different characters, which is really kind of a feat. As for actress, I do think Chloe's right. You know, Jessie Buckley has won the precursor awards. I am rooting for Renate Reinsve, who is the Norwegian actress in Sentimental Value. I feel like just like we learned to say Saoirse Ronan's name a few years ago, we're going to need to learn to say Renate's name. I think she gives this really layered performance that is quite special.
It's a really good movie, Sentimental Value. And I told Rebecca earlier today, I keep having these dreams or like visions
Take us inside.
of Sentimental Value winning awards that we're not expecting. I just think that there are always these dark horse moments.
Let's talk about some of the front runners here. So we've got your wish list, who you guys want to see win, but let's talk about who actually is going to win here. And you obviously, both of you mentioned Jessie Buckley, and I think that's for a reason because it seems like she is far and away the front runner when it comes to Best Actress. Take us through, Chloe, if you would, some of the other front runners in these big categories.
Well, I want to talk about the Best Actor category because there seems to have been a dramatic shift because for a while, at least I was talking about Timothée Chalamet, right?
Chalamet.
And I liked Marty Supreme, although my husband looked at me at the end and he goes, "That's it?" I was like, "Oh, Brian, this is why we don't go to movies because we just can't."
It's very stressful to watch, I have to say. It was very stressful for me.
It was. I thought that Timothy did a really good job. He really wants that Oscar. I think this is his third attempt. But I feel like the tides have turned against him a little bit. I think he's giving some people the ick factor. And he obviously is in the headlines right now for making comments about ballet and opera, but those were made, I believe, after Oscar voting ended. But I think that he's unfortunately lost the Oscar. I really believe it's going to be Michael B. Jordan.
What about, Rebecca, what about Best Film, Best Director? Who are some of the front runners you feel like when it comes to the Academy?
Well, Paul Thomas Anderson is so beloved and has never won for Best Director. He feels like he has sort of the real steam heading into this. I think a lot of people believe that Ryan Coogler's got a lot more movies in him. They will have an opportunity to award him in the future.
Paul Thomas Anderson has never won an Oscar as Best Director. That is shocking to me, Rebecca.
It is, and he's sort of the film bro favorite, the cineast favorite. He's also just really well liked. He's very involved in sort of preserving classic film. All these things that are important to Academy members who are not just sort of regular Joes. They're people who work in the film industry, and they care about that stuff.
What's the front runner for Best Film right now?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, the movie with the most nominations is Sinners, but the movie that feels like it has the most momentum is One Battle After Another.
Is there a possibility, Chloe, that we could see history in the making if, in fact, Sinners does take home Best Film?
I mean, yes, but also we were talking earlier today that I think we're going to have a good indication early on in the award show if you want some inside baseball knowledge. The first category is usually a supporting actor or actress category. Yeah. If you see, Sinners or One Battle After Another, dominating those categories, it could be a big sweep for the entire night. And if Ryan Coogler were to win, he would be the first Black individual to ever win in that category. And that's
for Best Director.
For Best Director. That's a huge moment.
Yeah.
And obviously, just like Paul Thomas Anderson, he is beloved. And yes, there probably are some more opportunities in the future for him to win. But there's so much buzz around Sinners. And I got to say, Sinners, I thought, a vampire horror movie, like, what is this? I don't know if I really want to watch this. But I sat and I loved it. I thought it was so well done.
Rebecca, Chloe mentioned the controversy as she kind of explained it around Timothée Chalamet and his comments around ballet and opera. Can you walk us through what happened there? What did he say?
Yeah, I mean, this is sort of what happens when someone does just an extraordinary amount of press and promotion. It is almost impossible not to step in it, as most young actors will find. Timothée Chalamet stepped in it. He was trying,
which is very character-esque of him, by the way. It's very
Absolutely.
Marty Supreme-ish of him.
He was really, I mean, the whole point of Marty Supreme is this guy really going for it in the medium of ping pong, and Timothy was really going for it with his Oscar campaign. But he made a comment where he talked about that he didn't want film to become kind of like opera and ballet, where it's this art form that's enjoyed by so few people and it's kind of niche. I think his comment was taken a little bit out of context, and it sort of exploded into an internet controversy. The suggestion being that he thinks those art forms are sort of dumb or a waste of time, which I don't think was actually his point. If you listen to this conversation he had with Matthew McConaughey, it was sort of a town hall that Variety did. And as Chloe said, the video of that came out after Oscar voting ended, which was 5:00 LA time last Thursday. So I don't think that really it will play a role in whether he's nominated, whether he wins or not. But it does show kind of his over-enthusiasm, perhaps his thirst and exuberance this award season, which maybe didn't land the way that he intended it to land.
Chloe, who else is on your bingo card? Who are we missing? Who didn't we talk about?
Let's talk about supporting actress, shall we?
Yes.
Tiana Taylor, she has had quite the moment during award season. And
Very long one.
Her Golden Globe speech was incredible. I wouldn't be surprised if she does win, but I know she's not the favorite here. A lot of buzz around Amy Madigan in Weapons.
And by the way, Tiana Taylor was in One Battle After Another with Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yes.
For those that didn't know.
Gosh.
Yeah. No one has mentioned Leo. Rebecca, Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yes.
He's already won.
Yes, but he was, by the way, incredible in One Battle After Another. And obviously didn't get any love at the Golden Globes either.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing about Leo is I think there's a perception that he doesn't, quote, need this. And he has not heavily
But is that
campaigned.
a part of the judging process? Like, do people take that into account? This person doesn't need this and this person does?
There are certain moments in an actor's career when they seem likelier to get recognized. Later in their career, if they've gone a long time and done great work and not had an opportunity, that can happen.
Sure.
But I think in Leo's case, he not unlike his extremely chill character in One Battle After Another, he has kind of like rolled through this award season. He's shown up at the things he was supposed to show up at, like the Oscar nominees luncheon, but he has not been kind of going out and shaking hands and trying to remind people how wonderful he is. That's part of the game, is part of it is sort of going and talking with Oscar voters and connecting with them. And I think he doesn't feel he needs to do that. And I think he's right.
I want to talk, Rebecca, if we can, about these new ground rules, which are shocking to me, by the way. And the ground rules are you have to actually watch the movie.
I know, breaking news.
I had no idea you didn't have to watch the movie in order to vote.
Yes. Well, the Academy has always had an honor system for Oscar voters. And as they fill out their ballots, the assumption is that you will have seen every movie in a category in order to vote on it. The reality is there are certain categories where people had not seen every movie. So what the Academy did this year was they made basically a box that you have to check on your ballot. If you watch the movie on the Academy streaming service, it will automatically mark that you have watched it. Perhaps you saw it at a screening or a film festival or your multiplex. Then you have to sort of manually mark that you've seen it. And the idea is to make people really cognizant that, yes, you should have seen every movie in this category in order to vote on it.
You think it's going to change anything?
I do, actually. I mean, I've talked to multiple people who didn't vote in a category because they didn't watch all of the movies.
Oh, interesting.
Interestingly, Hamnet, Chloe's favorite movie, one of my favorite movies of the year, a lot of people found the subject matter very difficult. It has to do with grief, and they were afraid to watch it. And so that's nominated in the Best Picture. I've talked to people who did not vote in the Best Picture category because they didn't feel that they could sort of emotionally handle watching Hamnet. Then there's also some of the documentaries and animated films. Things can be hard to track down.
Yeah.
The people who vote on the Oscars are working all over the world on sets. They might not have watched all of the animated short films, say. And so this year they will not vote if they haven't watched them.
I want to talk politics. Rebecca, I'll start with you on this. The elephant in the room, right? Everything that has really happened over the last year or so. I'm talking about the Israel-Gaza war, the U.S.-Israel-Iran war, now the ICE raids in Minneapolis. Where are we when it comes to talking about politics in Hollywood these days, especially on the Oscar stage? Conan O'Brien is hosting this year. What are our expectations both now and from what we've seen historically?
Well, Conan O'Brien is not known as a particularly politically vocal host. He's sort of liked and appreciated for his silliness and his whimsy. If you look at his jokes from hosting last year, they were about, the running time of The Brutalist, say. He doesn't engage in the way that previous hosts like Jimmy Kimmel did with politics in a larger way. And I think in some ways that's mirroring what we're seeing in Hollywood more broadly, where actors and public figures are tending to talk less about current events. And when I ask them why, it's not that they don't have feelings about things that are going on in the world. It's that they feel like they would be adding to the noise, that saying something on a red carpet or in a speech is not necessarily going to change the outcome of a war or of an election. It's merely going to become kind of part of this noise that we all hear and see on social media.
There is, though, one person that, if given the opportunity, will likely have to address what is happening overseas right now, and that is Jafar Panahi, who directed the film. It was just an accident. It was an incredible movie. I know that you spoke to him recently, Rebecca. How is he kind of handling the potential of having to get up on that stage and address what is happening in his home country, and really just the dedication that he's had to make to the press tour of promoting his film while his family is back at home trying to remain safe?
Yeah, it's been kind of heartbreaking running into Panahi periodically at events throughout award season, because I ran into him, say, at the Golden Globes. We're in a ballroom, everybody's sort of glamorous and having fun, and I see him looking on his phone at images out of Iran. That was during the crackdown on protesters there.
Yeah.
Recently, he was in New York to do some press, and it coincided with the start of strikes by the U.S. and Israel on Iran. He wasn't at the time able to get in touch with his family members there. So he's balancing these two very different things, promoting a movie and trying to get an audience for a movie that he sees as valuable in terms of communicating to the world the impact of the current regime in Iran. At the same time, balancing the pain and the heartbreak of not being able to communicate with their caring deeply about what's going on. So if he were to win, he's nominated in 2 categories, original screenplay and international film. Certainly I would expect that his speech would get into politics and to world events.
Chloe, we talk about politics here, and obviously that oftentimes comes up in ceremonies like the Oscars. There is also the controversy surrounding who the Oscars chooses to recognize or not recognize at that, right? We remember kind of the campaigns of Oscars so white, Oscars so male as well. In the early 2020s, the women were kind of seeing a run, right? They were moving towards more and more inclusion in every category across the board. But it looks like now we are going in the other direction. You've been looking into this.
That's right. USC Annenberg, they've put out a study saying that women in film in terms of representation has hit a 7-year low. And we're talking about 2025. So they compared like Warner Brothers, Netflix, all of the different studios and the percentage of how many women are featured in film in front of the screen. And it's shocking. And as for why this is happening, they couldn't really put their finger on it. But then the conversation turned to something I've been covering a lot, which we might hear about at the Oscars. We might hear Conan or people mention it in their speeches, is David Ellison over at Paramount trying to acquire Warner Brothers, and it looks like it's going to happen. And Warner Brothers and Paramount, turns out they are notorious for not having women in lead roles in their films. But I do want to cite one thing that is positive when it comes to women this weekend at the Academy Awards. History could be made with nominee Autumn Durald Arkapaw. She could become the first female cinematography winner for Sinners. Okay. So this could be a major moment for women. But when it comes to inclusion, I mean, I think it was incredibly shocking.
That is. Rebecca, do you have any more information on that? This idea that both Paramount and Warner Brothers, they're less inclusive, especially when it comes to women in leading roles?
I mean, one thing we know from USC's research and others is that if there is a female director, there are more likely to be women working down the line in acting roles, in behind the camera. So if at those studios there is less of a premium on hiring a female director, you're going to see that sort of ripple out in terms of the rest of the film. And, it's interesting, Hollywood-wide, because of the Trump administration, there has been a sort of quiet approach to inclusion. There was much more talking about it openly. There were programs specifically for female directors, programs specifically for directors of color. I think some studios have felt that they needed to back off from those, and that's not specific to the studios you mentioned. It's across the board in the entertainment industry.
How are folks, Rebecca, from your understanding, handling and or reacting to Paramount basically snatching this deal away from Netflix? Right, there was a point in which it seemed like Netflix had it in the bag. Right, they were going to merge with Warner Brothers Pictures, Warner Brothers Films, and the cable entities would fall by the wayside. Now Paramount came around and said, no, we're going to offer you way more money. The board then backed off. Paramount is now really kind of in the running of snatching up Warner Brothers in its totality. What is the reaction that you're hearing in Hollywood?
Well, from the beginning, whether it was Paramount or Netflix, the fear was of consolidation in general. If you have one less film studio, presumably people lose jobs, fewer movies get made. It's bad for the industry broadly. Ted Sarandos, the co-CEO of Netflix, had done a good job in the last month of sort of convincing the entertainment industry, like, we come in peace. We are not going to lay off as many people. We are still going to we're going to put movies in movie theaters. And he had sort of launched this charm offensive that was, I think, effective. Ultimately, Paramount seems to be the studio that has prevailed, and I think there's a lot of fear about what that means in terms of layoffs. Paramount has said they're going to continue to release 30 movies in theaters, which would be the number Warner Brothers released and the number Paramount previously released. That's a lot. I mean, that would mean they would be competing with themselves certain weekends. So I think people are viewing that with a healthy dose of skepticism.
Something that I found interesting is we did some digging with our entertainment producer, Lauren Wilson, and she was telling me that the last time that Paramount won in the Best Picture category for a film was in 2008, No Country for Old Men. And then before that was Titanic. So
Wow.
they need Warner Brothers more than Warner Brothers needs them, essentially.
As we're sticking kind of with this idea of inclusion, Rebecca, I know there's also a new category this year. Best Achievement in Casting. Why this category? Why now?
Yeah, there has been a long drive to create this category. One person who I interviewed about it is Francine Meisler, who's the casting director of Sinners. And she told me that it was very awkward for her to suddenly find herself sort of thrust into the spotlight. The career of a casting director is to push actors into the spotlight. And this year, for the first time at the Oscars, we're going to see a casting director on stage at the Dolby Theater. Everybody who works on a movie knows that casting is crucial to whether it works, that casting directors are the secret weapon of directors, that actors worship the good casting directors. The reason I think that it took so long for us to see was in some ways the casting directors themselves. They just had not been putting themselves forward. They see their whole role as being to showcase actors.
I want to talk about the future of the Academy Awards after they roll up that red carpet on Sunday. And I think obviously the thing that we have been talking about most is AI in film, right? The future of AI in film. The Academy actually added language about artificial intelligence to its rules after last year's Oscars, saying a film's use of AI and digital tools will, quote, neither help nor harm its chances of nomination. And Academy leaders have underlined that AI is, in fact, a tool. Rebecca, if you would walk us through what's going on here.
Yeah, I asked Academy CEO Bill Kramer and President Lynette Howell-Taylor to sort of clarify the Academy's position on AI. Those new rules were introduced after last year's Oscars. What they told me was essentially they're aware that the movie business is embracing AI tools and they don't want to get in the way of that. What they want to be sure is that there's still a human element in the creation of a film. But they themselves said they have work to do to sort of figure out what does that mean when you're talking about a highly technical category like visual effects, say, or sound mixing. The one thing they did say for sure, I asked them whether a synthetic performer like Tilly Norwood could ever be nominated for an Oscar. And they said absolutely, unequivocally not. An Oscar will always be given to a human being.
Chloe, for those that don't know, who is Tilly Norwood?
So she is an AI-generated actress that was created by an actress herself, Elaine van der Velden. She has a company called Particle 6, and she launched her in September of 2025, and not just put out, clips of her that startled many people in Hollywood, but she said that she was going to be auditioning for roles and was in talks with big-time agencies in Hollywood to represent her. And that's when you saw this onslaught of comments from celebrities like Whoopi Goldberg and others who were like, absolutely not. This can not happen. This is disturbing. And then you saw her creator kind of like walk things back and kind of go silent for a little bit. And now she's back with this music video where she's like flying through the sky with lyrics like, come on, actors, like you don't want to be left behind, like join in. And so who knows what's going to happen next. But Particle 6 has said that they plan to create like a Tillyverse. So unclear what that means, but perhaps other AI generated actors. Could we see Tilly in a movie one day? I mean, maybe, never say never, but it does upset some people, but others say that this is the way of the future and you see AI in all industries, including music.
Is the idea, Rebecca, that Tilly could act on her own in a movie with other AI actors, or that she would act alongside, for instance, Brad Pitt in Ocean's 20, if in fact they ever go with that one?
I mean, I think anything is up for grabs at this point. A real barrier to her working with other living actors is whether those other living actors want to sort of help a digital character have that sort of career step up. The Screen Actors Guild has come out against these sort of synthetic performers and is currently negotiating with the studios in their contract for ways to sort of deal with this issue and how it affects the compensation of human actors and the way they are treated contractually.
The Oscars, by the way, saw its lowest ever viewership in 2021, which when I saw that, I thought, wow, that's shocking because we were all still home during the pandemic. But, Chloe, if you remember, it was also when it was incredibly pared down. A lot of people were showing up virtually. They were all in those small boxes. I believe there was, in fact, a host on a stage. But nonetheless, they are now doing everything in their power to keep the momentum going in trying to drive viewership up because it's been ticking up ever since then.
Sure.
They're now saying we're going to go streaming, right? Come 2029, they're going to go on YouTube.
My kids will now know what the Oscars are because all they watch is YouTube television.
I mean, that's a very big deal.
It is a big deal. I mean, look, I'm still a linear television kind of gal. I feel like they're going to probably lose a lot of viewers, but maybe they just see that YouTube TV is the way of the future and they're not worried about it. It's still a few years away. I think it's like 2029, right, Rebecca, when this is going to go into effect. But if you look at last year, like over 19 million people watched the Oscars. I mean, this is still appointment television.
Maybe, Rebecca, they're less worried about the viewers that they could lose, like the people that Chloe is talking about, and looking at the potential of the viewers that they could gain, younger viewers, viewers outside of the United States. What is your kind of impression of this huge decision to start airing the Oscars not on ABC, which is where they normally air, but on YouTube?
Yeah, when I asked the Academy president and CEO about this decision to move from ABC to YouTube, they said it was driven by a few factors. One is they wanted the largest possible global audience. So people from 225 countries watch the Oscars. The films are from all over the world this year. We've got Brazilian films, Iranian films, French films. So it's a global audience. So what matters to us as people who grew up watching it on ABC, which is the network it's been on since the 1970s, is different from what matters to people all over the world. The other thing that they talked about was this ability to have a sort of second screen experience. So if I'm sitting at home watching the Oscars, I can have the YouTube TV up on my TV. I can have my laptop or my phone in front of me and be watching commentary and be sort of participating in other ways to engage with the show, which is how people increasingly watch live events like this.
Rebecca, I got to ask you, do you think that things could go south and they bring it back to ABC? Is this more of an experiment?
No, well, when you watch how quickly media is changing, 2029 is actually a long time from now. If you think of how much things have changed in the last 3 years, how much viewing habits have changed. So another consideration for the Academy is a nonprofit organization that makes the vast majority of its money from the sales of the rights to the show. So I think it's a safe assumption that YouTube had a good amount of money to put up for the rights to the show. And they have all of these other things that they do. Like, Chloe, you were at the Academy Museum recently. Those are the kinds of things that are financed by the sale of the rights to the show. So it's sort of a bigger picture, not only about how we watch, but also about how this nonprofit organization pays its bills.
Listen, guys, I want to get to the ever important part of the show, which is the fact that both of you are going to be in or around the Oscars. Chloe, you said you're going to be at the Elton John party, covering the Oscars from there. Rebecca, you're going to be at the Oscars for the 16th, 15th time, you said?
I think it's my 15th.
Your 15th time?
Right.
My God, okay. That's like more than Hollywood stars, Rebecca.
Will you start? Can you just take us inside from when you get there?
Yeah. What's it like?
What is it like? You step out of your car. What do you do?
Well, the funny thing is just getting there in a car, your car is examined by bomb-sniffing dogs, usually multiple times. The Oscars are a big, high-security event. So you're sort of sitting there in your fancy clothes, sweating, going through that process. When you walk in, the red carpet is this completely overwhelming blast of photographers. There are sometimes fans shouting from risers. I've been there in certain years where it's pouring down rain and you could see like the soap coming up from the red carpet. It's on screen extremely glamorous, but sort of behind the scenes, there are all these people working to put it together. One year I was in the stage wings. It happened to be the year of Envelope Gate, which was the year that La La Land was incorrectly awarded
Best
Picture.
I remember that.
And so I happened to be standing next to the accountant and the stage manager who
Is it your
realized there was an
fault?
error. I mean, trust me, I backed away quickly. But all of the people backstage who were trying to get it right, who were trying to put on this kind of incredible show, the way I knew something had gone wrong was that the stage manager, who had been cool as a cucumber all night, I heard her drop an F-bomb in her on her headset, and I was like, I haven't heard that before. And then, of course, the whole what you saw on stage unfolded. But so there were all these, I hate to say it, but sometimes the Oscars is the most fun when something goes a little bit wrong, when there's something a little bit unexpected or surprising.
Do you have a most embarrassing moment of something that happened to you or someone that you interacted with at the Oscars that you were like, I cannot believe I said that to? Insert name here.
Wow, there's so many to choose from, Yasmin. But I probably, one of my all-time worst Oscar years was when my white flowing gown got caught in the escalator at the Dolby Theater. And so it was terrifying. And I'm sort of yanking at my gown to pull it out of the escalator. When I yanked it out, it was covered in escalator grease. So then I just sort of went through the Oscars and the after parties covered in escalator grease. And it was honestly a good story, a good conversation starter if you're sort of chit-chatting with the star.
You're like, yeah, Brad, it's just grease on my dress.
It's just grease. This is what the cool girls do.
Speaking of dresses, what are you wearing, Rebecca?
I'm wearing a Donna Karan tuxedo gown that's currently at the tailor because the zipper broke. So cross your fingers on that one.
I love that. I can't wait to see it. Chloe?
Well,
What are you looking forward to? What are you wearing?
I have 3 options. All my outfits are sparkly and sequiny and gold and bronze. And I'm just excited to be there. I was told that it gets really fun at the after party portion. So I'm going to get to Elton John's party. There's a big dinner. I think there's an auction. There's a performer that I can't tell you who's performing there, but you'll see it. And then when the show's over, that's when some of the people who were at the Oscars are supposed to make their way either to this party or Vanity Fair. So I'm hoping that, I know a lot of people love Vanity Fair, but I hope a lot of people come to Elton's party and I'll get to see maybe some of the winners there.
Well, guys, I cannot wait to watch the Oscars. I'll be looking for pictures of the two of you with hopefully no escalator grease on either one of your beautiful dresses this Sunday evening. Thank you for spending some time with me on this Oscars special. Chloe Melas, Rebecca Keegan, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That is going to do it for us at Here's the Scoop from NBC News. I'm Yasmin Vasugian. I'll be back on Monday with whatever the day may bring. And if you like what you heard, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see you Monday.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.